I love my low-carb diet, but if I have too much body fat, do I really need to eat fat? Wouldn't it make more sense to also keep my fat intake low and let my body burn the fat that already is stored? This is a common question that I get and you may have about a keto or low-carb, high-fat diet. We'll discuss the answer in this video. I understand the thought process. Basically, if I am carrying around extra fat, why don't I just eat low carb and let my body supply the fat it needs for energy? This can happen eventually. However, there is a vital first step, which is getting your body adapted to running on fat as its primary fuel. Your cells must be trained to do this, which is a state that you may have heard me refer to as being fat adapted. Carbohydrates are an easy energy source for your body. It is a much easier source than pulling fat out of storage. However, carbs burn up quickly. If you have been eating a diet high in carbohydrates, your body is carb adapted and looks for them as its primary energy source. Therefore, if you reduce your carb intake, your body will ask you to feed it more by turning on cravings. Dietary fat that you eat is more accessible than stored fat on your body. With fewer carbs to burn, the dietary fat helps your body develop the enzymes and pathways needed to become a better fat burner of both dietary and body fat. In plain words, following a low-carb, high-fat diet trains your cells to run on fat, and with time, you become fat adapted. That explains why you need to feed yourself fat as you transition away from a high-carb diet. The question then becomes, once your body is fat adapted, why not stop eating fat and let your body burn the fat it already has stored? There are two separate ideas here. The first is the idea of eating a low-carb and low-fat diet, where fat makes up less than 30% of your diet. The second is the idea of reducing your fat intake, where you are bringing it from a high percentage of your daily calories to a moderate level. For example, going from 70% down to 50 or 60%. Let's consider the first choice, which is a low-carb and low-fat diet. This will not get you the result you want. Even after your body is fat adapted, it will need energy from your diet, which you will supply by consuming fat. Three main nutrients supply your body with calories. They are carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Of these three, only carbs and fat are readily used as energy. Protein is not a primary choice because it is a basic building block for so many structures inside of you. Using it as a primary fuel would be like burning down your house to stay warm. So you are left with just two main sources of caloric energy, carbs and fat. If your diet is low in both, fat loss barriers come into play. For one thing, with carbs and fats out of the picture, you need to eat a lot more protein. A very high protein diet will raise insulin levels, working against the release of fat from your fat cells. Also, your body doesn't want to waste protein by burning it for energy, so your body is wondering why you are starving yourself and goes into the defensive position of starvation mode. So the low-carb and low-fat diet approach is problematic. But what about the second choice involving the reduction of dietary fat? So instead of fat making up 70% of your daily calories, it makes up just 60%, for instance. There are a handful of studies involving fat-adapted individuals. However, I have not seen a study supporting this rather specific idea that these individuals improve their results when they reduce their fat intake. However, in my opinion, there is some logic to this approach. The things that we must consider are how high can you go with protein, how low should you go with fat, and when is the right time to make this macronutrient switch. How much protein your body needs is a highly debated topic with strong opinions on every side of the debate. And to further muddy the waters, protein needs change when certain factors are present. So you can't point to two 150-pound individuals and say they both need 54 grams of protein per day. The actual amount each person needs depends on many factors, including their activity level, age, muscle mass, and overall health. What we do see is that many research studies consider a high-protein diet to be one in which your daily calorie intake exceeds 30%. So for this video, we'll use 30% as our high for protein intake. As for how low to drop your fat intake, it will depend on your body. And to do this properly, you need to know how much of your caloric intake currently comes from fat. But to make things easy for this video, we'll run through an example using a 10% drop in fat intake. So let's say that you typically eat a keto diet, consuming 1,500 calories a day with a 70-20-10 macronutrient breakdown. In other words, 70% of your daily calories come from fat, 20% from protein, and 10% from carbs. Now you want to reduce your fat intake by 10% to encourage the burning of more body fat. So you shift your diet to a 60-30-10 macronutrient breakdown. In other words, you drop your fat intake by 10%, increase your protein intake by 10%, and keep your carbs at their original low. What does that look like in terms of actual food? Well, you might be surprised to see how little of a food swap is needed to pull off this 10% shift. You can do it by simply cutting out 2 tablespoons of butter and replacing them with 4 ounces of chicken. Now, before I go any further, I am not telling you to stop eating butter and start eating chicken. That is not my message. I chose these 2 foods because one is mostly fat and the other is mostly protein, and they were in my refrigerator. I simply wanted to share an example to demonstrate how easy it can be to go overboard with change. You don't want to get into the mindset that dietary fat is bad and end up eating a low-carb and low-fat diet. Now that you have an idea of what a reduced fat diet looks like, the last thing to consider is when to make this switch. This is really a question of knowing when you've reached fat adaptation. I have a video that goes into detail about building a fat-adapted metabolism, and I will point you to that video, but I can tell you that it takes at least a month of consistent adherence to your low-carb, high-fat diet. So you cannot fool your body by reducing your fat intake too soon. If you do, your body will go right back to carb cravings. There are devices that can help you determine what your body is burning, fat or carbs. For instance, if you are following a keto diet, a ketone meter like Precision Extra tests your blood for the presence of ketones. Ketones are normal compounds that show up in your blood when glucose is running low. Ketones come from the breakdown of fat, so if they are present, fat is being burned. The Lumen device analyzes your breath to let you see if you are burning carbs or fat, so it is beneficial for both keto and low-carb dieters. Now, I have links to these devices in the video description area below this video, but keep in mind that these devices tell you what is happening in the moment. Fat adaptation is a changed metabolic state within your body. So you can use these devices to make sure you are on the right track, but to reach a fat adapted state, you'd want to see consistent results for at least a month. Keto and low carb diets have been a godsend for many people. However, since I have been teaching this eating style, the diets have been diluted by a flood of keto-friendly snacks and products. To me, these junk food knockoffs are the biggest barrier to continued success on a low-carb or keto diet. If you have found that your weight loss has stalled, the first step is to cut out keto snacks. Step 2 is to track your current macronutrient intake so you know how much fat you currently eat. Step 3 is to give this reduced fat concept a try. The thing that never changes is keeping your carbohydrate intake low. If you are unsure which foods are low in carbs, you can download my list of 100 low-carb foods by going to drbeckyfitness.com/low-carb food list, or click the link in the video description. Thanks for watching. Before you go, please click the subscribe button. I do appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.